We know the New York Islanders have big salary cap issues, so today we'll discuss a player they may be able to sign without breaking the bank who could still help them on offense. We've got that and a lot more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We've got a lot to discuss on today's show, but first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a comment, a question, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, you can email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You can also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all season long. During the offseason, that means hirings, firings, trade rumors, free agency, and the draft. So make sure you stay with us throughout the offseason for that. And it's great to talk Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. So over the weekend, the Carolina Hurricanes made it clear of what the asking price would be for the negotiating rights to Jake Guentzel. And, you know, everydayers know we've talked about Guentzel and what potentially he could add to the Islanders, be that fit on the top line and join Matthew Barzal and Bo Horvat to give the Islanders, for the first time in quite some time, a legitimate top line. But there's problems, obviously, with that. The cost, you know, the advantage of trading for the rights, and Carolina said it would be a mid-round pick. So let's say a third, fourth, fifth round pick. Fourth round is what most people are saying. So, you know, you spend a fourth round pick, all that does is give you the right to negotiate with Guentzel. And while every other team can only offer him 7 years, the Islanders would be able to offer him 8 years. Again, based on Guentzel's age and the amount of money that it would cost to sign him, probably in the neighborhood of $9 million a year, it just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. You know, Guentzel's already 29. He'll be 30 in October before the season starts. Do you really want to sign a 30-year-old player for 8 years? The answer is no. You know Lou Lamoriello would do it. You know that they would offer him the no trade and no movement clause and all of that to sweeten the deal. But overall, the big issue is right now, the Islanders have a little more than $6 million in cap space. Yeah, it went up by about $300,000 as the NHL officially announced what the salary cap was going to be for next year. And, you know, again, always good to have it go up rather than go down. But, you know, it's $88 million a year, which, you know, doesn't give the Islanders a lot of room to maneuver, but it does give them a little bit of extra. Right now, according to Cap Friendly, the Islanders have $6.43 million in cap space. And, you know, that doesn't include re-signing basically Kyle MacLean, re-signing Ruslan Ishkakov, if they are indeed going to re-sign him, whether it means re-signing Simon Holmstrom, which obviously they are expected to do. And then, you have Oliver Wahlstrom, Matt Martin, Cal Clutterbuck, Sebastian Aho, Robert Bortuzzo, Mike Riley, all of those guys. Not all of them will be back, but knowing Lou, more of them will be back than what we're hoping for. But again, it leaves the Islanders without a lot of cap space. So even if they are able to trade that, let's say, 4th-round pick to Carolina for the rights to Jake Guentzel, you're probably going to have to make 2 moves. Trade away, and I'm making up names, but, move on from J.G. Pageau and Anders Lee in order to make that happen. And then, again, you still have other players you want to add. So one player who might make sense is Tyler Toffoli, who would give the Islanders some offense for sure, but would not break the bank. Now, Toffoli split time between the Devils and the Jets last year. So let's face a certain fact. Number one, he's familiar with the metropolitan area, having played for New Jersey for 61 games this year. And he scored 33 goals this year after scoring 34 the previous season for Calgary. And Toffoli is 32 years old. So, if you're looking to add a guy on a 2, 3, maybe 4 at most year contract, you could do a lot worse than Tyler Toffoli. Now, he is a natural center, which is less helpful to the Islanders. They already have a glut of centers. But here's the reason why Toffoli may indeed be a little more desirable. His cap hit last year was $4.25 million. And if you could sign him for $5 million, 3 years at $5 million, for example, that would, without question, help the New York Islanders offense. And he can play either wing too. He's one of those natural centers who's also played both wings. So, to me, if your top line then becomes Horvat, Toffoli, and Barzal, and Toffoli also has won a Stanley Cup, so there's that. That is certainly an advantage. Gives you a little more leadership skill and experience in that range. These are all good things for the New York Islanders. And again, here is a guy you might be able to add without breaking the bank. Would you still probably have to trade one player away in order to make Toffoli fit under the cap and still re-sign the guys you want to re-sign or improve the team in any way? Yes. But is Tyler Toffoli a lot more affordable than Jake Guentzel or Martin Necas or even guys who are really out there and say that the Islanders could add Mitch Marner? Those are, because of the mess that Lou Lamoriello has made of the cap and the prospect pool, those are long shots of long shots. And more realistic is to add a guy like Toffoli, or maybe even 2 guys similar to Toffoli, who can give the Islanders some offensive boost. And Toffoli, with back-to-back 30-goal seasons, would definitely fit that mold without breaking the bank. And that is important for sure for the New York Islanders, because, look, right now, until Lou Lamoriello finds a way to clear out some of this, I don't want to say dead wood, but some of these bad contracts, some of these players who are older and not earning, not producing at the level of their cap hit. And unfortunately, on this team, there are many of those. It is not going to be easy to improve this team. And all this team does at this point is just get a little older and a little slower and a little less capable of producing at that same level. So again, as far as Toffoli goes, do not sign him to a 4, 5, 6 year deal. but a 2 or 3 year deal at $4.5, $5 million per, if that's something he's amenable to, would be a great fit for the New York Islanders. And we'll see whether or not Lou Lamoriello could do that. And you don't have to give up a draft pick to get his rights, unlike Jake Guentzel, you'd have to pay the draft pick, definitely sign him to an 8-year deal, probably at around Bo Horvat money, $8 million, $9 million, something in that range. And lock yourself into another guy with a no trade clause. And as the last 4 or 5 years of that deal, as he gets older, would not look good for the Islanders. So you don't want to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again. You want to change things up and make new mistakes, or at least try something different that you hope will work. Tyler Toffoli could very well be that kind of player for the New York Islanders. We have got a lot more to get to on today's show. Do the Islanders need a penalty killer, or maybe even two? We'll talk a little bit about that and why that may be so. We'll also continue our player-by-player look at the season with one of the better surprises of the year, Kyle MacLean. And for our Islanders' birthday of the day, one of the two brothers who played for the New York Islanders, won some Stanley Cups for the New York Islanders, later went on to be a head coach in the NHL. Let's see if you can guess who that is. We've got that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and Stanley Cup Finals, and more. You could bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. And Islander fans, you can use your knowledge of the NHL on FanDuel. Check out, may want to bet who's going to win game 2. Do you think Sergei Bobrovsky has another shutout in him in this series? Maybe you want to bet on who wins the Stanley Cup or who wins the Conn Smythe Trophy as the playoff MVP. You could find all those odds at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I wanted to address the penalty kill situation, and it's something that has been bothering me throughout this offseason and longer than that if you kind of think about it, because this team has really struggled all year long on the PK. Not only were they dead last in the league this year by a wide margin, but this, statistically speaking, was one of the worst penalty kills in NHL history since they started, calculating the numbers and statistics on the PK. So you have to start with that. You're not starting in a good place. Then you have to add this. Matt Martin, Cal Clutterbuck, both of them are unrestricted free agents, may not be back at all. And even if they are back, and both of them have killed penalties at different times, they're slowing down and have not been as effective on the PK as they have been in the past. Add into the mix one of the other Islanders' top penalty killers, some guy named J.G. Pageau. J.G. Pageau is still under contract with the Islanders. We certainly are aware of that. But we are also aware that every trade rumor that comes up with the New York Islanders, whenever they talk about, we've got to move on, we've got to free up some cap space. Well, the first name that comes up, and understandably so, J.G. Pageau. So again, if even two of these three guys are not back next year, and even if only one, even if you just move on from Pageau, the fact that Martin and Clutterbuck are slowing down and have been less effective, not to mention the fact that it's very likely one or both of them will not be back, and whether they should or not is, as you know, another issue. But you're going to need to fill in those blanks with some other players. And excuse me, the question is, how do you do that? And I don't see a lot of, maybe Hudson Fasching, out of the players currently on the roster, could fill in and do some penalty killing duty. If Ruslan Ishkakov signs with the Islanders, I don't think he's big enough to be or strong enough defensively to be a regular penalty killer. Pierre Engvall, not physical enough really to be a full-time penalty killer. Do you want Anders Lee out there? I don't think so, although obviously if he remains with the team, his offensive role is being diminished. But, I don't want to think about Anders Lee being out there trying to slow down Connor McDavid or, Barkov or any of the faster skilled players on the power play. So you're going to need some new guys to come in and kill penalties. And, again, that's assuming that you move on from Pageau. And even if you don't move on from J.G. Pageau, there are still players, there's still need to get better on the PK. And you're not changing your defense core all that much based on the cap situation. I would highly doubt the Islanders deal either Adam Pelech or Ryan Pollock this offseason, even though dealing one of them could make sense from a cap perspective. But it's unlikely to happen. They both have full no trade clauses they would have to waive. And again, it's just not a move that Lou Lamoriello is likely to make. So you got to go in and get some penalty killers and add them to the mix. Now, the good news is penalty killers typically tend to be bottom six kind of forwards. And that means you're not breaking the bank to sign one or more of these guys. So, whether you want to add a player like Kevin Stenlund, for example, who, is in the Stanley Cup final right now, playing for the Panthers. If you want to watch what he's done or what he's doing in the rest of the Cup final to see if he's a good fit, go for it. He did score 4 shorthanded goals over the last 2 years, and Florida's PK this year ranked 6th in the NHL. So, right now, the projected cap hit for him is about $1.3, $1.5 million a year. Again, that is a player who could be a bottom six forward, especially if you deal away a guy like J.G. Pageau, or, and will help you on your penalty kill. Another name that Islander fans are probably familiar with, Jordan Martinook, who played with Carolina. Again, older. He is 32 next month. So, but he, is coming off a deal where he earned $1.8 million for the last 3 years. You're looking at a guy you could probably sign to a 2, maybe 3 at most year deal at $1.5 to $2.5 million a year, to be liberal about it and give you a bigger range. And again, it wouldn't break the bank. He'll give you 10 to 15 goals. He scored 14 goals and 32 points this past year. So if he gives you on the Islanders 10, 11 goals, 25 to 30 points, I could live with that because, again, you were trying to replace J.G. Pageau, who was earning $5 million and gave you 11 goals on the season and 32, 33 points. If you can replace him with a guy who's earning, $2 million a year and can give you the same 11 goals and 33 points, that's a better allocation of your limited cap resources. That's what a third line player should be earning. And again, it just comes back to the way Lou Lamoriello has mismanaged some of that cap money for the New York Islanders, and that's why we are where we are. All right, we'll see whether the Islanders can add any of these players, but as I said, they definitely do need to get a new penalty killer on this team, assuming any one of the three players that I mentioned, Clutterbuck, Martin, and Pageau, are not back. And even if they are all back, adding a bottom six player who could kill penalties to this group, which struggled so mightily last year, is advisable. We've got more to get to on today's show. We'll talk Kyle MacLean, what his season was like, what his future with the team is, and we'll also talk, have our Islanders birthday of the day, all that coming up and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on the Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Before we get into Kyle MacLean and his season, just wanted to remind everyone we are having our meetup tonight. It'll be at the main event on Old Country Road in Plainview to watch Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final. So game starts at 8 o'clock. I'll try to be there a few minutes before then. And please do join us. It'll be great to watch a little hockey and have some food and beverages and just enjoy each other's company. Great to always meet Islander fans. So please do try to make it if you can. And again, the link to letting us know you are interested is in the show notes. All right, so we continue our player-by-player look at the Islanders with Kyle MacLean. And MacLean, undoubtedly one of the more pleasant surprises on the Islanders, making his NHL debut this year after spending most of the season in Bridgeport, came up in late January. His NHL debut was actually the final game that basically that Lane Lambert coached the New York Islanders. And MacLean played in 32 games for the Islanders, 4 goals, 5 assists. He was a +5, had 11 penalty minutes, all of his points coming at even strength. He had 26 shots on goal in 32 games, so just a hair under a shot on goal per game. He had 60 hits, which is almost 2 hits per game, and blocked 6 shots, which is a little lower than the number that you would like to see. But you know what, MacLean, if you take his numbers and, give them out for 82 games as opposed to 32, he's right where you want a fourth line guy to be. He's in the 12 to 16 goals, 25, let's say, to 30 points, and a plus minus. And again, you liked his hustle. You liked the way he went about playing the game. He wasn't afraid to be physical. He was pretty solid defensively and fit in well on that fourth line. Cizikas, Martin, and Clutterbuck had been the fourth line on the Islanders, except for the 2 years that Matty Martz was in Toronto. That was pretty much a constant for more than a decade for the Islanders. Kyle MacLean came in and showed he is more than capable of doing that. Now, there are some things he has to work on. He averaged 10 minutes, 5 seconds of ice time per game. But that number went up in the playoffs. It went up later in the season as Patrick Roy developed a little more trust in him. So I think that is also part of the equation. But here's the big thing he needs to work on. And to me, everything else about his game is acceptable or better. But in the faceoff circle, 42.5% success rate. Not what you want. You compare that to J.G. Pageau, who is about 55%. That's a big come down. And, MacLean at this point, I don't expect him to be J.G. Pageau, who's one of the better faceoff men in the league, but at least get me at or above 50%. Don't be a liability in the faceoff dot. 42.5%, not going to get it done. And when you sort of add to the mix, the Islanders' other centers, Brock Nelson, for example, less than 50% in the faceoff circle, that, then takes away from, the Islanders used to have 3 really good faceoff guys. You had Horvat, Pageau, Cizikas. That gives you 3 guys who will, on more nights than not, win more than half of their faceoffs. But if all of a sudden you're going with MacLean and taking out Pageau, that negatively affects your team. And that is something the Islanders have to work on with MacLean. I hope he's working on it this offseason. Add a little strength. And it's not just about that. It's also about technique. It's about tying up your man after the faceoff, knowing when to go forward with the puck, when to draw it back, who to draw it back to, how to tie up your man after you've drawn back the faceoff. All of these things, Islanders coaching staff needs to work on with Kyle MacLean for him to take the next step. And if he does, and if they move on from J.G. Pageau, I expect Kyle MacLean to be the Islanders' fourth line center next year and beyond. Again, he is a restricted free agent right now. So the Islanders do need to re-sign him, although everybody expects that to happen. And MacLean does have arbitration rights, so look for the Islanders to try to get that deal done sooner rather than later. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. And today, it's the 62nd birthday. Boy, does that make me feel old. A former Islanders forward, Brent Sutter. Sutter, first-round pick of the Isles, 17th overall in the 1980 NHL entry draft. The Viking, Alberta native. Played 3 games for the Islanders in 80-81 and scored twice and had 2 assists in those 3 games. Became a full-time Islander in 81-82 and topped 20 goals right away. Was a member of the last 2 Stanley Cup winning teams for the Islanders and even had 10 goals and 21 points in 20 playoff games, in 1982-83. His best season in the NHL offensively, easily 84-85, 42 goals and 102 points. Stayed on the island until early in the 91-92 season when he was traded to the Blackhawks, finished his career there in 97-98, played in 1,111 NHL games, 363 goals, 829 points, 1,054 penalty minutes, add 144 playoff games, 30 goals, 74 points in those. Went on to coach later, both for the Red Deer Rebels of the Western Hockey League, and then the Devils and the Flames, and then back to Red Deer, where he last coached in 2020, 2021. So still active in hockey after his Islanders career was over. One of his better games with the Isles, how about February 2nd, 1982 at the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum. The Islanders welcome in the Washington Capitals. Al Jensen, the goalie for Washington. Roland Melanson got the start, but Billy Smith also played, as did Dave Parrow, getting into this game for Washington because it was so high scoring. And in this game, Brent Sutter, with the game tied at 1, scores his 5th of the year. Brother Dwayne and Dave Langevin with the assists at 12:23 of the first. And then less than 4 minutes later, Brent Sutter, his 6th second of the game, 6th of the year. Gordy Lane and Dwayne Sutter with the helpers. Islanders up 3-1. But it doesn't stay that way in this game. And, well, let's just say that in the third period, with the game tied 4-4, Brent Sutter scores a 3rd goal of the game, his 7th of the year, completing the hat trick. Dwayne Sutter and Clark Gillies get the assist. The Islanders go on to win this one by a score of 7-6 for Brent Sutter. 3 goals. He was a +2. He had 2 penalty minutes and 5 shots on goal, which, by the way, did lead the team in this game. Islanders win it in regulation by a score of 7-6 as Brent Sutter gets one of his hat tricks in his NHL career. Brent Sutter is our Islanders' birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone again for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Tomorrow on the show, we will continue our player-by-player look at the Islanders roster with Casey Cizikas. We'll talk about his season and, one of the bigger questions on Zeke, where's he going to fit in next year? So we hope you'll join us for that, and we hope we'll see you tonight at the watch party. So again, main event in Plainview. Game starts at 8. Join us, and we'll have a little fun talking a little hockey. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and of course, let's go Islanders.